Thanks everybody for joining us tonight, for reaching out while locked in. This is the last of these sessions for the year. We're going to take a little bit of a break until after the new year, after tonight's session, so everybody can enjoy the holidays. And then our plan at the current time is to get back in January, probably around mid-January. We talked about kind of letting some of the convention season get over with, although a lot of that's being disrupted now too. But we'll probably hang out wait until towards the middle to latter part of January. But we'll be sending emails out to you guys to let you know, give you plenty of heads up before we get started back again, and have an agenda for next winter. So looks like a lot of the same crowd that we normally have, and appreciate you guys coming out. Quite a few new folks joined us as late as about 10-15 minutes ago. So welcome to you guys too. Tonight, we're pleased to have a couple of our younger extension specialists within the College of Ag, or newer, I guess, and they're still pretty young, especially when you compare them to me. So we have Dr. Morgan Hayes and Dr. Josh Jackson with Biosystems and Ag Engineering, and they're sharing the same room but socially distanced and the best they can tonight. And they're going to help you guys out with talking about some different cattle handling facilities is what I think the primary focus is going to be tonight. So these are two great resources that we have within the college, and appreciate them agreeing to do this. So Morgan and Josh, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to blank out of here, but I'm not going anywhere, and we'll let you guys kind of handle questions as you see fit. If y'all want to break it up and do it as you go, or I'll leave that up to you guys. We'll try and keep an eye on the chat room for you, and if anything comes up, we'll let you know if it looks like it's pressing. If not, we'll just wait to the end and handle it then. So welcome, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start off with the introduction here. I am Morgan Hayes, and Josh here is just stepping over to the side. We're going to talk tonight about cattle handling facilities. And just so you have an idea how we're going to go through our talk this evening, we're going to start out with a little discussion about some of the resources to design cattle handling facilities that we use, and ones that are, available to you as well. And specifically some ideas for where you might see some designs and get some inspiration for a handling facility. And we're going to just briefly go over the basic components of a handling facility, and then we're going to go over 4 examples of some designs that we've done in the past. So just to start off, from a resources standpoint, there are a number of publications that UK has, extension publications that are available that talk about cattle handling, and I'll go through those in just a second here. Also, Josh and I are available to provide some assistance, and county agents see a lot of handling facilities, so please reach out to your county agent if you have questions about a handling facility or want some suggestions for improvement. A lot of the equipment manufacturers have started designing systems and putting some layouts available on their websites, and that's really a nice opportunity to see some different designs that they're working with. And I never discount the importance of seeing your neighbors' facilities or friends, family. And if you go and work cattle with someone else and you think that their system works smoothly, take note of what they're doing there and figure out if there's a way you can incorporate some of that into your facility. And hopefully at the end of tonight, you come away with some inspiration for, making some changes in your handling facility or some ideas for how to improve it. The first extension publication I just wanted to highlight here was the AEN 82, which is Cattle Handling Facilities, Planning, Components, and Layouts. It has some really nice layout designs in it. It's an older publication, but I think everything in there still stands. Similarly, the ID 108 is really part of the beef book, and it's on handling beef cattle. And the AEN 145, this is one that Josh and I just published earlier this year. It's designing or reworking your cattle handling facilities, a checklist for success. It's a much shorter publication, than the previous ones. And it's specifically there to provide a thought process to begin planning for designing or reworking the facility. It asks a lot of questions about how many animals you have, what types of animals, so that you can really sort of have those thoughts in the back of your head before you start working on your facility design. It also talks a little bit about siting and labor. All those things will certainly go into designing a good facility. There's also a really nice publication from the Alberta government called Corrals for handling beef cattle. And I think this one has a lot of really interesting images, top-down views of handling facilities to provide inspiration. A lot of these would be larger facilities and maybe larger than you need, but all of the different options and layouts that they show would give maybe some inspiration for a new facility. Similarly, Midwest Plan Service out of Iowa State has a beef housing and equipment book, and it has a number of really nice designs. It does a really good job if you had to maybe create a curve in a system or something like that to show you how to build a radius to turn cattle effectively. And so those cattle handling facility components, one of the things I think that's really important about a handling facility is that they all need to, for the most part, need to have all of these components to really be a very efficient working setup. But the number of components that they need, the size that they need to be is really going to depend upon your operation. Everyone's going to need some way to collect the animals from either the pasture that they're in or the barn that they're in and hold them and potentially sort out ones they want versus ones that they don't want. They need some form of alley to go between those holding and sorting pens. And that alley also is going to push them towards some sort of crowding area. And the crowding is the one thing that I think we'll touch on a little bit in these designs as we go through tonight. There's a couple different options for how you might crowd your cattle from a group down into a single file alley. What they call the working alley, I would call a single file alley typically. That's how we push our animals into our head gate or our squeeze chute, depending on our design. And that working alley, it's really important we have enough space in that working alley to be able to line up a few head, because that's what makes working the cattle more efficient. And then other things that we need to also consider in our design is if we're going to include a scale, where we're going to include that scale. And I'll let Josh touch a little bit on scales later on. And if you have questions about those, he would be the scale expert here. And then last but not least, we need to have some way to load these animals out in our working facility. This is something that sometimes is a last thought, and it shouldn't be, because it's, that's how we market our animals. So it's really important that we get this load out properly incorporated into a design. So those crowding options that I just mentioned here, there's really two common options. We traditionally always think of the crowding option as a tub or a sweep, but the bud box is another design that's really gained popularity. It's an option where we can basically push our animals in and use a series of panels to create an area where we can then turn our animals around. And this is just a visual demonstration of how a bud box works. We usually bring in a few head at a time, 3 to 4. We push them into this rectangular area, a bud box. Usually it's about 10 to 12 foot wide and about 20 feet long. There's our cowboy there pushing these cattle around. He walks in and he closes the gate behind him. And he moves forward, and by nature, he's going to put pressure on those cattle, and those cattle are going to turn and exit around him or her. I don't want to be gender specific because I often am the person doing the pushing. And you can see here that he's basically using his body to force these animals to go towards the working facility. we have been big proponents of including bud boxes in some of our designs for a couple reasons. One, it tends to be a fairly cost-effective option. It is just panels instead of buying a tub. And so for people that are on tighter budgets, this often is a less expensive way to crowd animals. The other benefit of a bud box is that it fits extremely well into an old tobacco barn. And many producers, since we've gotten here, have been asking us if they can use an old tobacco barn. And you'll see that in our examples that we are looking at tobacco barns today as an option for where to possibly place a handling facility. That green highlight there is just a note to self. If you are looking at a bud box, one thing you will want to include is a man gate there. One, for ease of getting to and from the squeeze chute, but also as a safety precaution, because you are in the bud box with the cattle. And if you did have something that got worked up, you would want to have an escape route for you as the person in there. Similarly, the other option for crowding is a tub. And commonly sized, it's a 10 to 12 foot gate that we're using to sweep the cattle into the working alley or the single file alley. And the reason I note this here is that it's a 10 to 12 foot gate typically that sweeps these cattle in. That means that this tub is actually slightly wider than 10 or 12 feet. And a lot of people want to place tubs into certain locations, and they actually are challenged because there's some restrictions on size, and it can be difficult sometimes to fit that tub in, because by the time you put the bars around the outside of that gate, that 10 or 12 foot tub is actually, 11 foot to 13 feet in radius. So and with that, I'll let Josh go through example 1 tonight.
All right, so we do a lot of farm visits to look at producers and help them reevaluate some of their systems. This is a visit we did to Central Kentucky, and this individual had a rock fence and along a road, but he also had a narrow lane. Well, it's pretty much his only access in and out of the farm was this lane adjacent to his farm. So we had a lot of concerns for this facility. He was wanting to put it directly adjacent to his barn, because that was really the only space we had. So we limited by, there was a large number of large trees, which provided a lot of shade for when he's out there actually working these animals. But it's a consideration we had to take into account. The path for equipment. So like I said, there was a path that was probably 30, 40 foot off the barn that was his main road in and out of the farm. And adjacent to that was a rock wall. And we also had a holding area. So existing holding area, so the far side, so what had been behind the chute, so the far side of the barn was a holding area at the end of the barn he had been using for a number of years and wanted to continue to use. And we also needed to, this producer said we needed to look at a loadout area for this barn. So needed a way to back a trailer, a gooseneck, and be able to load out animals. And we were also nearby a silo. And, he was looking at 100 plus calf pairs, but possibly trying to expand. So trying to plan for a lot of those as well. So, looking at, this is kind of a general design that we came up with for him. So we're pushing them from the back side of this barn, so where the arrow is coming from. So pushing from the back side of the barn, we're pushing some of the animals into his barn. The center alley of his barn, he wanted to keep utilized for hay storage, and the other side he's also using for some hay storage as well. So, but then the left side here on this picture, the 12-foot alley with the 55 head, he was still utilizing that. So he had an old silage feeding bunk in there as well. But, trying to use that to hold some of the cattle. And then adjacent to the barn, because we're limited on the width, we've kind of just put our pens directly adjacent to the barn. And so they're going to be 10 foot wide and potentially holding 10 foot head, or 10 foot wide and hold 50 head apiece approximately. So getting the animals ran up into here. So we had the lot directly behind the barn here. And so we're running from that lot directly behind the barn into these pens here. And so just get it so we can have this proper square footage per animal. So giving them some options, but then still having the ability to recapture animals, to recapture and potentially sort. So a lot of different flexibility for this operation. So this is one of the ideas in which we came up with for the producer. And so, we told him that, when we're working these 100+ head, he could technically run just the 2 alleys, the 12-foot in the barn and the one 10-foot directly adjacent to the barn. And so he can run them in there, hold them, and then if he needs to, he can potentially sort from that. So we were trying to think about, our gate swing potentially, and how to best flow them. So if we need to sort some from that inside portion, now we can put them into the second alley from the barn. We can sort the animals into this one of the outdoor pens. So really it's looking at flexibility, making sure we have the proper square footage per animal, the ability to recapture, and potentially have it to load out as well. So we have the ability to sort some animals. And in these outdoor pens, we added gates along, and we told the producer, you don't have to add all the gates. We put these just as an idea to give you options. You don't have to do anything we suggest. It's just these are what we came up with given the space. And so, that way, if you need to separate off some towards the back of the pen or lower section, you can put animals and hopefully further sort within those pens and then work a couple animals and give yourself a little more space and breathing room. So again, adding a couple more gates within those longer pens just to give us options, and same for the ones that are close to the barn. We added some pens, and for this producer, we always try to take labor into consideration. We also suggested some slam latches so he could quickly and easily work the animals with limited labor resources as well. And this design, because of the trees and everything that we had constraining us, we really suggested the bud box. In this system, we suggested the bud box. The chute is angled. So the chute's angled just because we're taking into account that most of those chutes kick out on those chutes is to the right side. So we need about 5 foot of space so that we can open the chute up. If we have to get the animal goes down, we have to get her out some way, shape, or form. That kick out is to the right, so we can still get that animal out or do what we need to do. And so that's why the chute is also angled in this photo. And so we gave ourselves, they got 3 to 4 animals, can go into this bud box. And, we're showing here we can do it from the back pen, we can do it from this closer pen. It's just giving us option and just keeping in mind our gate swing so that we can swing that gate and then pull the other gate around and really funnel them in there and get them worked quickly and easily. So the producers seem to like this idea, especially the bud box, just from a cost standpoint. And, we hemmed and hawed a little bit about trying to get a tub in there. And he, for the space that we had, this seemed to be the best option, going 90 degrees to where we're loading the cattle here. So this seemed to be the best option for him. And then we can run him down the chute. So once you run him down the chute, you get him through the bud box, run him down the chute, and keep into account. So Morgan mentioned this as well, but the man gate highlighted in blue there to aid the transition from the chute to your bud box. So keeping that will make it a little handier. So in this case, we could run the animals directly into the larger lot. So that we gave, that was one option. He runs them into that alley with the stone wall. That was one option. And so, but the other one, if we need to recapture, we put the gate close enough where we can open it up, run the animals directly in. And so trying to get the producer a lot of options so he can recapture animals and then force them on down if he needs to, make sure they're captured, then circle them back around close to the barn if he needs to just hold them there so he can rework them or do whatever needs to be done. So really, getting a lot of options here. And I think in one of these, I show kind of how the gates swing. And then this one, I lock down some of the gates. And so the gates in blue, they could be fixed, wood panel, board, railroad, guardrail, whatever it may be. Those could be locked in. And the red ones, except for the ones around my tub or bud box, were still shown in red. But everything else can be. These are ones that are going to be able to swing. So I wanted, again, it was like, it doesn't have to be done. It's just a suggestion, but it's one of those things you can determine how much flexibility you have by changing the design. So we're just giving him a lot of options here of what he can do and how he can sort them and getting a lot of different little groups here. And then we also made sure, try to keep in mind, giving it open access, open gates, so you have quick access to the pens and holding areas. If you need to get to an animal, get to whatever FCUs and push animals forward. So trying to come up with a lot of different ideas and still be able to load out. Load out was going to be from the end closest to the closest to us. And so it was going to really be, one of those 10-foot alleys. I told him you can pick one if you need to, one, whichever may be more convenient for him to back up your trailer and load out. So it's 10 foot, should be able to hopefully, with experienced producers, back a trailer up to that and be able to load our animals and with the gooseneck was how we pretty much wanted to load them out as little lots. And again, just having the options of this bud box was really what worked for him. And so there it shows in this picture the rock wall and kind of the and the road that we were looking at there. So it's a dirt road. So this is what he actually built. So a little different. Instead of having 3 pins, he went to 2. Still able to run the animals into the chute and recapture the animals from the chute, and maybe even potentially sort them. So a lot of times get recommendations, and then they can do whatever they want. Something we considered. I told him if the being directly adjacent to the barn, if he's doing a lot of work in the wintertime, it may be worth it to add some gutters potentially and be able to divert some of that water away from your system, and maybe even add geotextile fabric if it really becomes an issue directly adjacent to that barn there. So I was just, some thoughts, and one of those things, he can use it a couple of years and see how he likes it. And if that's something that he needs, he can add it later on to his system. Oh, is there any questions on this one? Okay. And then, so you can kind of see the bud box in the back there behind the tree. So like I said, the trees, and then you can see the John Deere tractor there and the path there. So we were really limited on that space. And so trying to just utilize everything we could in this one. And then his actual alley leading from his toe. So he does have a good backstop there. Once he gets the animals in there, go ahead and load them, get the next set worked. And so it seemed to be a very functional system for him. I'll let Morgan talk about this next example with the cow calves and feeder options.
Yeah, feel free at any point if we're doing one of these examples here to stop us, because while we're talking about an example, it's probably the easiest time for us to come back and answer questions on them. And we're happy to do so. So this is a second operation that we were at, and this one was a cow-calf operation that also had feeders. And this was an existing working facility. So the facility already existed when we came there, and we were really looking to do some reworking and some modifications to the design. And there were 2 major concerns with the facility. One, the cattle really balked when they were going into the sweep area. And the second reason they balked was when they got through the sweep and got put into the single file alley, they balked before they went into the chute. The gentleman who was working cattle at this farm typically worked alone, but he would bring in some help when he was actually working the cattle, which is a recommendation by us that you do have at least a second person there when you're working cattle for safety reasons. But there was still very limited on labor, and the other people that were there were not necessarily experienced at handling cattle. So he was the one that was having to push the cattle as well as do most of the work up by the chute. So having animals, balk at entering the tub that he had, and then again, balking before they went into the chute was a challenge for him. He had one large holding pen. So I think you can see my arrow here. This area here was actually where he captured animals, and from there they got pushed across over here to get worked. And so there was really only one large pen, but there was no way for him to sort or recapture on his cow-calf operation. And he also was running backgrounding calves in the barn right adjacent to this facility, and he didn't have a way to sort off a sick calf or any animal he wanted to hold back. So when he wanted to bring out groups at the end of backgrounding and sort them by weight, he didn't have a real effective way to make proper groups. He was also planning to expand his cow-calf herd from 40 head up to 100 head. So he was looking to make expansions and improvements on this design. And so the first thing we did was we took a good look at his working facility itself, which was his alleyway with some sorting gates in it, and then his single file alley that led to the chute. And there were two challenges with his design. The first was he had a dead corner where his sweep went through. He had previously had one board essentially laid across this corner to keep the cattle from sticking their head into the corner. But the area between that and the gate was still wide enough that those cattle could turn back around and balk before going down into the single file alley. So what we did was produced two post spacings that would allow him to actually turn a gate just with some wood and posts. So not having to buy a tub, but just having that corner function a little bit more effectively by figuring out how we could fit a gate in there and not have too much space that the cattle could get their head back through. Let me go back here a second. The other spot where he was really having a challenge was in the single file alley. He had two backstops in the single file alley. And one of the things we had him actually do was remove the backstop and use a slide across backstop instead of a top down, because it was very apparent when we walked through there that there was a significant shadow because of the orientation of this handling facility. And so when he was working his cattle, the backstop made a series of shadows across that single file alley, and none of the cattle wanted to step across those shadows. So switching it out for a backstop that was basically a piece of pipe was a more effective method for him to keep those animals in that single file alley. The other thing we did was on the large holding pen scenario, the holding pen was actually in a very effective spot for his cow-calf operation. He could bring them in from, I think, 3 different pastures really effectively. And he didn't have a problem capturing these animals. It was just a problem once he had them captured, figuring out how to sort them. One thing that Josh mentioned on the last design was that for us, having a way to recapture animals after we've worked them is really important because inevitably one gets missed coming through the squeeze chute, or you see something wrong with the animal and you don't have the right medicine there to take care of it, so you want to hold that animal up. So having some way to recapture or hold that animal after you've put them through the chute is really important. And so we designed this holding area into 6 smaller pens with an alley across the front. And the purpose for this was so that we could bring in the cattle and we could fit. In this case, it was about 25 head in each one of these pens. So about 75 head would potentially fit here. Right now, he only has 40, but as he starts to expand, this gives him some space and options to bring all these cattle in. And then he can use the extra pens over there to do some sorting. And he's always going to have an extra pen or 2 left over so that he can recapture animals as they come back out. But he only has one pathway from the front of the facility where he works these animals over here to these holding and sorting pens. So it's important that we be able to clear this alley completely when we push animals over and then bring animals back in on this alley, because we don't have those 2 alleyways. We need that alley to function as both a to the chute and a from the chute. So we need to be able to clear it between groups of cattle. We did include a water tank in this design because he works these cattle alone. He knows it's more effective for him to call in the cows with feed by himself the evening before. And that way, whenever help shows up the next day, they don't have to spend an hour or 2 hours getting the cattle in when that assistant is there to help him. They'll already be captured and they can quickly start working them the next morning. We also modified this design by putting in 4 pens instead of 6. The challenge with the 4 pens is it allows for a little bit less sorting capacity, but the benefit is that there's less material cost in building these pens out. The other benefit is if you were working your cattle and you wanted to call them in, 2 of these large pens would hold his whole group of cattle with the water tank in the center, so he could actually physically lock them into both of these pens if he needed to overnight, and he would still have enough space in there for everyone. there any questions on that design? Don't see any more.
So, a lot of times we're trying to help producers as well. And a lot of times they have an all tobacco barn. And so, we know that in this state, it used to be a really big tobacco state. Now it's not quite the case. And so really trying to help people reutilize these barns. So they already have a structure. Can we work the cattle in there? So as long as it's structurally sound, we try to help producers, potentially work animals within their system where they can have shelter to be away from the elements. And so here's one we did up in, so this is one that's, Central Kentucky had a fair number of hills. So that was something we had to consider as part of the limitation. So there was a hillside where, all the cattle would be coming from. So topography was kind of a limiting factor. The front of the barn was used for a trailer and truck turnaround, but they had, one entrance from the center of the barn. They really still wanted to park their equipment in the center alley. So that was one of the main considerations for trying to get the chute and everything to one of the side alleys of the barn. And, really we're looking at existing holding area. We had an existing holding area kind of shown in brown here to the side of the barn. So we had an area to get them up, call them up, feed them some hay the night before, get them up, but not really good area to sort them and get them in and out of the barn as he needed. So, and he's looking at 50 plus cow-calf pairs, thinking about the possibility of expansion. So we came up with this system where he had the holding pens directly adjacent to the barn, and then actually had his working facility within the barn. So we can see here in this picture, the roof has been removed. So we can see that there's our two side alleys here. So one's 10 foot, one's 12 foot. Again, I told him he could adjust those dimensions as he sees fit. Whatever's going to work best for him. I think in the 12s, he already had some 12-foot panels available. So this worked for him. But we see that we got the chute for this system off to the side. We got a 10-foot tub in this system, a 10-foot 90-degree tub in this system. So he can still work the animals. So we want to get them coming in here through the red gate and then on into the barn here. So I just have that showing for the roofs cut out here so we can kind of see, just get a general idea of how this is laying out. So all the animals are coming down from that hill, down this path here, so about 12-foot path, and then coming on down into our barn. So that was kind of one of those things we're trying to take advantage of what he had there, existing fence line, and told him he probably just needs to extend it on down to his barn so he can run the animals along that fence line and then into his barn. So here, all the boards have been removed, kind of makes everything a little bit more easy to visualize. So again, showing our two pins to the side of the barn, and then our facility within the barn, 20-foot alley going to our chute, a single file alley going to our chute, and then gates along that center alley. So, bringing them down off the hill, I got both pins open. Ideally, being able to push them into our facility, into our holding pins and sorting area. And so from there, we can sort it this far in. I wasn't really a big fan of that just because of the way the gate swung. I think it'd actually be easier to sort it this end because just due to the way the gate swings. So it kind of shows the difference between the two here. This one's swinging from the center as this one's swinging from the end on the other gate. So it could be a little easier to sort cattle from pin to pin. If it needs to get a couple, we can also, similar to our other designs, add some of the gates in the middle of the pin to help separate animals or separate animals as needed as well. So again, we get the animals into a holding and sorting pins, and from there, we're going to move them directly into that center alley of the barn. So we take another, I said up to 25, but in this case, we probably take 5 or 6 animals, run them into our barn, and shut our red gate in that case. So, and then we go ahead and progressively shut gates, progressively working the animals forward, shutting our gates, pushing them on down towards our 90-degree tub. And so once we get down to our 90-degree tub, we run the animals in, and then you can see the exterior wall. So I added back the exterior wall there, so we can see how the cattle are going to have to flow here. So we open back up. So once we get the animals into the area, for our tub, getting ready to push them, then we open our gate back up on this end of the barn so we can run the animals directly out. So open that 16-foot red gate again. So then we go ahead and push them in our tub, run the animals through, and then we can technically, also if we need to, be able to have the ability to recapture animals. So we open the other gate outside and have the ability to recapture animals if needed. So in this case, what we wanted to have was that center alley. If we need it to be, we can still park equipment in there, still run equipment through there, but we can also get our cattle running through there. So whenever we need to work our animals and you run them through there, and it would probably be a good idea, again, if we're running a large number of animals through there. I mentioned geotextile fabric on the outdoor one, maybe even on this indoor one. If he's routinely working animals, it could be a good idea to put those in geotextile fabric and rock down in there as well. And so again, we can work them from the second pin, push from the second pin. So that was the first one we showed, push from the first pin and push. But just gives them some options as far as, capturing our animals. So for load out, again, similar to the other design that we had, we're loading out from one of the first two pins. In this case, it was a 12-foot, but we could also make it just as easily, make it the 10-foot, and we could add some gates so we can progressively push them forward. But I told him, again, that's options, that's additional cost that would be up to him. But, having the ability to load them out onto a gooseneck trailer and load them out there. So we had the rock area and 24/7 access, essentially, because he had the gravel in front of the barn there, to be the ability to load them out in all kinds of weather conditions. So it's very flexible farm for him, and he had a good design here. So, we also told him that he could, he could, if he, really wanted to, load out of that center alley, but it being 16-foot wide, it would not be ideal. It might make it easier for the animals to get around him. But I was like, if you really, really want to, then, it'd be up to you. But you could load out of that center alley, but we think it'd be easier for him to push the animals in with either the 10-foot pin or the 12-foot pin. So, this here shows that also it'd be good to have the yellow shown through there. This could be a good location for a walk-through gate. So just to give him some flexibility and options if he needs to get back and forth between pushing the animals and back up to the chute to work them, give him some flexibility and options. And again, we suggested he using slam latches or another system where he can quickly and easily shut gates and keep progressively moving animals forward. So here's the cutout view again from the hillside, animals coming from the hillside. They had the small area in brown here for the hay storage, and then also, cutout view of the barn. So the siding of the boards of the barn on this left side have been removed to show the chute, the 20-foot alley, 11-foot for the chute and palp cage. It's the total length of that. So giving them some options, working the animals on the side. It does involve a couple more steps, but with the fact that we had to have that center alley still be available for equipment, we limited them on options, but it does give them the ability to be in and out of the inclement weather to work the animals. And so here shows a similar option. I'll let Morgan talk about this.
So this is another facility with basically the same dimensions on the barn, and we suggested a similar layout within the barn, and they bought on the layout of the barn, but this facility had a different challenge. It was really being challenged by the topography of the ground here. So this facility has a sort of a flat low area in the center. That blue line on the image there is a fence line, and it's got fairly steep hills on both the left hand and the right hand side of the picture, and this as well as another steep hill. This is a low lying area here that they're using basically as an alley to push cattle up towards this end of the farm. And there's a pond here that they have to somehow push around, but there's some marshy areas around it. So they're pretty limited on how they're getting animals in and out. So we did some work here to get some holding pens designed to sort of fit in this area, because that alley is too narrow to be able to create the sorting areas that they need. So what we essentially did was we created in these little thinner red lines here are suggestions for how a fence would lay here. And we created this fence line here that goes up along the pond as you go further out, although this is a larger holding lot just before that pond. This plus the existing fence that's in blue provide us with a funnel to push these cattle up to this working facility. So This farm worked off of sort of an alley system, so they could pull the cattle down into that alley from a number of different pastures. And by creating that funnel at the end, we were actually able to push cattle effectively. What tends to happen is if we don't have a funnel here right before our holding and sorting pens, is that they tend to balk and turn right where they would go into the facility if we don't have a good convergence there to efficiently get those animals in. And then we have 4 separate pens for sorting. So they wanted the ability to sort. It was a cow-calf operation, and I think they had 2 different calving windows, but all the cows were still running together. So they might have older and younger calves potentially at the same time. So they needed enough pens to be able to divide them out. So the option here with these 4 pens, pen 1 was sort of where they entered. And then from there, we could sort into any of these other 3 pens. Similarly, we can sort between pen 2 and 3, between pen 3 and this large lot. The large lot was primarily placed there, 1, because it was a location that needed to be used for something. The other reason that we kept it like that was it was a perfect lot for weaning calves. So those calves could be weaned in there, and those cows could be given access to any of these other pastures, and they would have a fence line here where they could go nose to nose with their calves to have a lower stress weaning environment. But those calves would be very much contained down here right near the working facility. And then when it was time to load out, they would be readily available for loading out as well. The side alley is maybe a little extraneous. It might not be necessary in all circumstances, but because of how this existing fence was, this side alley was the easiest way for us to push cattle from this pasture back into the system. Also, when we were working, having those 2 alleys side by side meant as cattle came back out of the chute, if we wanted to recapture, they could come back in the main alley, and the side alley would still be available for pushing new animals up. So if we did have a lot of animals and we were trying to figure out where everything went, it did give us an option for animals to be going in and out at the same time. So you can see here, this is recapturing here or pushing out this way. If we were pushing out into this field, both would be options available. Or we could push out and send all of our calves back down into this larger holding lot if we were working them and we wanted to keep them up because they're weaning. That pen 1 design was very intentionally set up so that from pen 1 we could sort into any of the other 3 pens. That gives a lot of options, especially if someone is working cattle with just one other person, larger groups of cattle. This gives them the ability to move a lot of different animals into different pens and have groups that are consistent, that are going through the chute, that they can push up and work a manageable number at one time. Labor seems to be a major concern at almost every farm that I think Josh and I would agree on this, that we visit. So we're always trying to figure out ways to make it practical for 1 or 2 people to work these animals without overwhelming themselves. The other thing I just want to point out with this design is that, we put on the sorting pens some wire and board together in our recommendation on this facility. But for our larger holding pen, we put in a woven wire fence. And we're comfortable with woven wire fence with posts on 12s here, as long as we have that set up correctly for weaning those calves. We don't need to run the whole thing in board or guardrail, but the closer we get to that working facility, the more important it is that we get some really heavy fencing up with good sturdy posts behind it to really make it structurally sound. I think that's the last slide. Is there any questions on 3A or 3B? Okay.
So the 4th example is we had a much larger tobacco barn. So the other one's 40 by 60. This was 40 by 96. And it had opening on the center alley and in the two side bins. We concerns and limitations, we were looking at 100 cow-calf pairs with possible expansion. The old tobacco barn is blown down. They were building a new one. This one needed to be dual purpose. They were still growing tobacco. They had some outdoor holding pens, but they wanted the capabilities to feed, sort, care for, and sort and work cattle within the barn. So, still being able to run through there. So this is kind of the idea that we came up with it for them. Was having that we had a 180-degree tub to the side there on the right hand side, 20-foot alley going up to the chute, and then the 11-foot chute and tub there as well. So the arrows show we're running animals in. So really we had some holding areas already available, and so we said, okay, we're going to try to utilize that, but run the animals in here. You have pretty much a lane where animals enter and lane where animals exit. And, they're running down here to the tub, and we have a progressive system where as you go along through here, you're able to shut off some gates. We don't have, we do have a dead corner here, so we would put additional gate there. We don't have that gate drawn in there, but we would put a gate there to help with the flow of the animals. And then, again, we're still progressively shutting gates, trying to get them to go on, work on through our chute there, and then running them on into our tub, push them through and into our tub. Now in the center alley, one of the things we added to our center alley was he wanted some sorting and holding areas within the barn itself, because if you need to work an animal or whatever may happen, a pink eye, foot rot, anything can happen on a farm. We all know this. And so, green arrow shows we can have them entering in this pen, and red arrow potentially exiting. So gate swing in this case is important. Being able to get the animals to flow in there a little easier. Again, we can have it similar to this pen, with the red arrow. We can have animals entering here. Another place, we can have a smaller pen. If we have some calves, something like that, we have them in here, and just keep them in here under shelter and take care of them as we see fit. I told them, we could do that. Similarly, if we really, really had to use it, I hate to put animals right next to our working chute, just because, if we have our drugs there or anything else, they might knock it or bump it or be next to us while we're trying to work animals and create a dangerous situation. I was like, if you need to have animals, if we could put them there, we can. That might be the first group you work, though. And so just keeping that in mind. And then similar to the back of the chute, I wasn't as concerned. We could put some gates, a small man gate there to keep them away from our head gate where we're actually doing our work and keeping our equipment. And so, but still green arrow, they can enter the pen and exit the pen as we need them to. So, Morgan mentioned it, and I'm harping on it a number of times, but, having the ability to recapture. So if we have something that does, we see an animal that needs to be treated or needs to be kept up in some way for whatever reason, having the ability to recapture, as they exit the chute, we can recapture them and then send them directly back through our facility if needed. And then similar with the other pen here, animals can be recaptured in the larger pen and worked again. So, just giving them flexibility and options to, and we also included, maybe adding some hydrants in the barn, getting some water sources in the barn. And he was wanting to have some water tanks. We weren't too hep on it, but if you needed to keep for a couple of days, just not long term, for a couple of days, we said this could be an option. You put some tanks in there and keep them in there for a limited period of time. So, the tobacco wagons, the wagons still be run down the main and side alleys for this barn. So he does have that flexibility. And so this is also another system where we could, potentially use a bud box. So instead of having this tub here, we have off our center alley, goes out 20 foot. Then from that, 90 degrees of that, we have our bud box. So this could be another system, and it might give you 12 foot to the side, enough to squeeze by with a wagon if you absolutely had to. So that, we this one went ahead and drew in a tub for the producer, but it could just as easily be drawn as a bud box system. And the bud box would actually be going down that center alley, about 4 foot from the left side of that center alley. So again, being able to just pull through with our wagons. And, we've shown everything being drawn with gates, but you could easily just use planks for the sidewalls of the alleys. And so one of the things I also want to do here, so before we finish here, is just give a shameless plug for some of the scale systems. So Morgan mentioned it, and I'll talk about it more now. It's just, so we have two different ways of doing it. So the location, if you want to put it in the alley behind your chute, you can constructing a platform alley scale system. And the AEN 156 is using a kit to set up a cattle scale system underneath your squeeze chutes. I checked this morning, and you can search whatever e-commerce site you like, but if you search for livestock scale kit, they're running about $170, $175 to $200 for a scale kit. So that includes the load cells and display. And you can build your own scale system for less than $500. And so actually maybe more around $300. The price of C channel has gone up recently, but really it's just, there's nothing complicated about getting a scale system underneath one of these chutes. It's just a piece of 5-inch C channel. And like I said, the kit, the load cell kit usually includes your load cells, your display, junction box. And so everything you need should be in that kit. So as long as you know how to weld, or if you have a FFA high school or something like that, they can help you weld. And it describes everything you need to know in those publications. And if you have any further questions, you just contact me. But really, I'm a big fan and proponent of using scales, because we buy, sell, and treat animals on a per weight basis, and so this is something we should really know. And it can be cost effective. So with that, I'd like to open up for any questions for Morgan or I.
All right, thanks guys very much. Been checking the chat room, not having any come that way, but anybody, you can either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type it in the chat and we'll catch it that way. I had one for you guys, and whichever one wants to tackle it, but you talked about the bud box, and it seems to me like if you bring them into that bud box and then you're going to be bringing them back towards that gate you put them through, that needs to be a very secure gate that you put them through. And you may have said it and I missed it, but I think that I'm assuming that would be the case.
Yeah, you'd want a heavy duty gate. I mean, in general, most of these would be bull gates. I mean, or heavy gates, however you want to describe them. We really are big proponents of a slam latch as well, especially because when you're coming up with those cattle in there, you want your eyes on the cattle. And so if you have a gate that you can just swing and it locks shut as you pull it shut behind you, and you don't have to worry about tying your gate up with your chain. And I'm a big proponent of using that slam latch for that exact purpose, so that you can keep your eyes on the cattle, being aware of what's happening in front of you, and that gate is shut and secure behind you. That's one spot where you do need to make sure your dimensions are right so that it does latch properly, though.
And with the gates, there's 14 gauge, 16 gauge would probably be appropriate. There's some, they have like bull gates or this gate. Really it's the gauge. It's how heavy is that gate. So really it's the gauge that's important to look at there. And at some point, if they do start breaking out, tearing down the 14 or 16 gauge gate, maybe the gate isn't the problem. It could be the cattle. So that could be we have to sometimes shift our thinking. Is what's the issue?
Yeah, got a follow-up question to that is, will the slam latch hold a cow that's trying to back up, and what type of slam latch are you talking about?
So there's a few types of slam latch, and it should stop them if they're trying to back up. Usually the ones I recommend have two heavy metal bars, pieces of flat iron that drop down. So when you push the round, how would you say it? The pin into the latch, it pushes through the piece of metal. I feel like I should pull it up on my screen, but you're going to see all kinds of other things then. Basically, the way that the thing works is there's two vertical pieces of probably 1/4 inch thick steel. And then when the bar slides through, it locks in between the two of them. And then you have to pick up to slide the gate out the other side. So in both cases, you have to manually lift to get the slam latch to release. But that bar locks in between the two from either way. So it'll swing 180 through that slam latch, but you have to physically open it. Does that make sense? When you search for them, it might become obvious what we're referring to.
And for some,
go ahead, Josh.
So for some gates, there will be one-way slam latch will only slam one way, and then there's other ones like Morgan described, which are two-way slam latches. So most of what you're talking like moving cattle is probably going to be a two-way, so you can go swing that gate 180 degrees potentially if needed.
Sounds good. I don't know if I can If y'all will unshare, I've got one pulled up I can share real quick.
Sure thing.
All right.
How's that look?
Yeah, so that'd be the one. That's the one that Morgan was described with that pin. So making sure, keeping in mind, I've seen also, making sure you straddle that bar there, that horizontal bar, because I've seen on some operations where you don't have it around that horizontal bar, and then it can sometimes, even though you have those bolts on there, it can actually twist. So making sure you keep it in line with that horizontal bar is also an important factor.
Well, there were a couple other questions.
And there's a couple other ones. I guess, what's an appropriate cost for a scale? What's an approximate cost for the scale? So depends on whether you're doing the platform alley or the or underneath your chute. If you're doing underneath your chute, it could be about $300 thereabouts, and whatever time and labor you have for actually welding it. So I'm assuming that you're able to have the capabilities to weld it, or you have an FFA chapter. That can be one of their projects to help weld this underneath your chute. So and it describes in the publications. Think about, how do you lift if you're putting it underneath your squeeze chute, how do you lift that up with either pallet forks or if you're able to get the carriage that some of the manufacturers come with, like, the wheel systems. So that can be an option. I think if you look at the platform alley scale, it could be about $700 to build it, just because, the cost of metal has also gone up. So we're using 5-inch C channel. The cost of metal has gone up here. It'll probably go back down, but as it is now, it's a little more expensive than it was.
And the scale publications are both UK extension pubs, so your local agent can help you find them, but you can also search for them online. The names that he listed there with the AEN numbers, if you search for those, you'll find them through Google too.
You might want to type those back in chat if you guys don't mind.
Okay.
So did you see the other one? Do you recommend blacking out the walls leading up to the chute to offer only one exit?
I do not. I don't know what Josh is going to say.
I mean, a lot of times it depends on the number of animals that you're working. Because we're not working the large number, I guess I'm concurring with Morgan, because we're not working a large number of animals, if it helps your animals move, sometimes that can be advantageous. It might be better, maybe put some fluorescent lighting or some LED lighting above your alley to get them to flow a little better, so you have proper lighting conditions all the way down the chute. It can, but sometimes, I think it's actually better. It depends on how you move your animals. So if you're actually right there next to the chute, and we didn't really talk about this, how you're moving and pushing the animals. So you walk directly adjacent to the chute, and that they'll want to have that natural urge is to get around you. So that should help move them forward. If you move directly adjacent to the chute, right next to the animal, walking next to them, and then that should help push them down the alley, potentially. Some animals won't go either way, but so I'd probably say no as well. I mean, but at the end of the day, the system has to work for you. So, if it works for you, so be it. But I tend to recommend, and how we typically suggest, moving the cattle using their pressure points and points of balance. Really, we need to have open so they can see you and they want to get past you. They want to see the danger potentially.
Yeah, I think that's, and sometimes I'll see what you guys think of this. Sometimes it might not be a bad idea to have the opposite side of the person that's going to be kind of bringing them maybe blacked out or solid, but leave the side open that the person is trying to work them from.
Trying to push them. So
that
yes,
was
access.
Exactly what I was going to say. Is that sometimes, especially if you have like a V in your shape, like you have it Ving off to a side, and you're trying to get the cattle to move, especially on an angle, and you think that there's any possibility of seeing a person when they make that turn that they're not going to want to go, that would be a spot where I would say blacking out that side that you're not walking on, but that the cattle could see through, that might be a good option. In general, though, I prefer as much openness as possible. As long as you know how your cattle move, I think you're better off allowing them to see you, because you can be in the right position to move them forward. And most people don't have enough labor to have random people standing in front of them. But my mother can be in the wrong spot and she can be the only one helping me. So it's always possible. I don't want to suggest that it's not possible that one of two people could be in the wrong spot or both. And it's always possible.
Yeah. So I got another question. Well, first, talking about the scales, Dr. Limcooler said he found one. He's Mr. Google search guy. So he said he found one for $170, I guess,
Yep. And
on Amazon.
so that would probably be the scale kit I'm talking about. So that'd be 4,000 or 5,000 pound load cells, the junction box, and a display for $170. So really, you have that plus the cost of your C channel and the time it takes for you to weld it up. So like I said, all together it might be about $300. Just depends on how you want to count your costs. But it can be a lot more cost effective. And I just want producers to be able to weigh their animals. So you do have to, with that scale system, you do have to calibrate it yourself. It's a 2-point calibration, and it's got a zero weight, a zero, and a known weight. So I would just use some bagged feed or mineral bag, something where you know the weight, and then add that on to 1,200 pounds or 500 pounds, whatever. I'd say at least whatever you think your average animal would be.
So now, Josh, the problem with people weighing their cattle is going to be that they're going to find out their 1,200 pound cows are actually 1,500 pound cows. So you're going to ruin a lot of people's perception out there.
And so, that brings up another issue Morgan and I, been discussing is if you have those cows who are big, those big cows. If I have a big cow producing 400 pound cow, a 1,700 pound cow producing a 400 pound calf, or I have a 1,300 pound cow producing a 500 pound calf, and times will get tough, which one do I keep? And so, and there's differences in efficiency, but that can become a real consideration. It can be a real consideration for producers to think about. If I'm got a cow over the winter, and there are some efficient large cows, there are going to be some efficient small cows. But if I have a large cow producing a smaller calf and that 1,300 pound cow, I think it becomes something to think about. So Kenny Burdine, you probably concur that just because you have a bigger cow and a bigger calf doesn't necessarily going to mean more money. So
it's all about the two components of profit are cost and income. So can't forget that cost part. All right, so we've got another one. What is a good distance for alley between the bud box and head gate? So
I think we generally say about 20 foot at least. Having the 20 foot to the back of your chute, and then your chute's going to be about 11 foot additional length, and that's including your palp cage. So overall length, about 30. So overall length about 31, 32, give or take. But just being able to queue up a number of animals, being able to queue up all 3 or 4 of those animals that you're going to run in there is the key.
I think the one thing that's worth noting is you never want more animals going through the crowding tub or the bud box than are going to fit into the alley in front of it. And no one wants to push one animal at a time. We always want 3. Some people want 10, but if you're going to put 10 through, you better have space for 10 to go, right? So, and we don't really want to put 10 through anyway. I'm not promoting that in any way. But we certainly want to have enough space for that 3 or 4 to line up in front of it and a backstop behind them, because that's really for our safety, that we're moving them out of the crowding and into a single file alley. It makes it safe for us. It makes it safer for the cattle. We're not going to break the system. That's why that gate isn't going to get destroyed, because nothing's circling in there trying to go over it while we're not paying attention. So that 20 foot really is important. I know people that give that up and they're okay with that, but you have to be cognizant when you do that you can only push forward 1 or 2 animals at a time, and they don't like to push one at a time.
Absolutely. All right, guys, any more questions for Josh and Morgan? Been some good discussion tonight. We really appreciate that. So I'm not seeing any more coming up yet. Please type them in. So while you're thinking about those questions or putting them in, the CAPE code for this week, if you're wanting to get credit for that, in the signature portion of that form that you fill out, you can put beef barn. and communicate with your county agent. They're the ones that actually have to certify this as an educational program, but different counties kind of have different criteria for that. So be sure that you communicate with your county agent to make sure you're doing things correctly to get the proper credit for the CAPE educational part. Would like to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving as well coming up. And on behalf of my Beef Extension colleagues, Les and Jeff and Katie and Kevin, we wish you guys happy holidays, and we're looking forward to getting back with you with this webinar series after the first of the year. But we are going to take a bit of a break, as I mentioned earlier. Any last questions before we cut you guys loose? Really appreciate Josh and Morgan joining us tonight. That was fantastic. I think a lot of great information. And we do appreciate you guys joining us this evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
You bet. Any other last ditch questions? All right, folks, everybody, please be safe, but enjoy the holidays to the best of your abilities. And we look forward to seeing you guys in a new year that's going to bring a lot of great new things, we hope. Take care. Good night.